last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
Hey gang, welcome back to a brand new edition of Dark Matters Radio. As always, KGRA Digital Broadcasting are the people to thank. And not to mention my producer, Ms. Chanel, who does a 5-star job each and every week. Tonight, we're going to have a heck of a show, but first, a couple of things. Number one, Mark Center is not going to be able to join us tonight. He wrote me earlier today. He's having he's coming down with something. But he said, hey, you don't want me on the show? And I said, okay. So he's not going to be here tonight. But, of course, Mr. Gary Cassell is. Gary, of course, one of our co-hosts. Gary, where the heck are you? We'll get you up here.
I'm somewhere in his house.
Oh, there he is. Okay, there you go. And tonight we're going to have a very, very good show. Our close, tight buddy, Mr. Chris DePerno, a fellow police officer with me. We didn't work together, but he wore the badge. I wore the badge. There's a closeness there that you may not understand, but Chris is a heck of a solid guy. He's also the state director for the Mutual UFO Network in the state of New York. And Chris, welcome back to the show, buddy. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Gary. It's great to always be on your show. It's always lively, amusing, and fun-filled.
I was talking to Chris a few days ago, and he told me something that I found fascinating. And it's something that may not appear to be totally coherent at first glance until you stop and you think about it a little bit. And what is that thing? Well, that during the Second World War, the Nazi German state, came out with some mind-bending technological advances and achievements. Now, was this all an organic process, or might there have been something else to it? Now, just think about this for a second. I've said this in the past, but in September of 1941, my dad, who at the time was just turning 16 or 17, because he came from a large family, and they were like everybody else before World War II, were scrambling to make a buck, total lie about his age, and enlisted in the National Guard. The Pennsylvania, well, at the time, I believe it was called the State Militia. Now, what's odd about that is that the unit he joined was an honest-to-God cavalry unit with horses, boots, saddles, etc. And when I was a kid, and he would tell that story, I was thinking, oh boy, kind of like John Wayne and all those cowboy things. Well, no, he said, no. He said, actually, I followed more horses with a shovel than I rode one. But think about this. That was in September. The war started in December, 1941. And 4 years later, we literally went from horsepower to nuclear power. When you think about that, it's mind-boggling. But the Nazis, the stuff that they came out with during the war was mind-blowing. Fortunately for the Allies, for us and the Allies, a lot of that stuff didn't begin making its appearance until later in the war, 1943-44. But what were some of those technological achievements? Well, at the beginning of the war, and I'm talking about 1939 now, because that's actually when the war with the Germans started, when they invaded Poland. Many countries were still flying biplanes, not a heck of a lot different than what was flown in World War I. They came out with aircraft that were some of the most advanced in the world at that time. And within a couple of years, my God, they came out with a jet aircraft, the Me-262. Now, in 1936, 1937, the United States Army made the transition from the bolt-action spring-filled rifle to the M1 Garand rifle, a semi-automatic 8-shot infantry rifle. And we thought that was pretty slick. The Germans were still using bolt-action rifles for the most part. The Japanese were using bolt-action rifles. And hey, that M1 boy, that would outgarand them just about every day of the week, until the Germans came out with something called the Sturmgewehr, the STG-44, the world's first true assault rifle, a fully automatic rifle that was fed from a 30-round magazine. They took their 8mm rifle cartridges that they used in their Mausers, in essence, cut them in two. Not literally, but that was the cartridge that came out. And they fed them through this automatic rifle. It was a game changer. As a matter of fact, the Soviet Union, during the war, was so impressed by what the Germans had achieved with that they began working on their Kalashnikov AK-47. The next thing the Germans came out with, some of their wonder weapons, the V-2 flying bomb, They could launch these unpiloted, guided aircraft fueled by a pulse jet, and they started dumping them all over England, another blitz. Then they came out, or did I say, I'm getting confused now, the V1 and the V2. Was that the V1 or the V2?
V2 and V4.
V1 was the more like a jet, the way it was fired.
That's the one, the V1. The
Yeah,
V2
was a shorter range.
was an interbalistic
was the first ballistic.
missile.
Yeah.
They came out at the very end of the war, and it was so advanced that we grabbed it as soon as we could. Damn near a fully electric, almost totally silent submarine. And as it was with the submarines they had, they damn near caused the British Isles to collapse before we were able to get over there. So they had some fantastic stuff in the works. Then,
well, let's not forget they also had the first jet fighter, and it was the only thing they had that could
the
defend against the P-51.
ME-262. Yeah, that's what I said.
It was created solely for the purpose of facing the P-51 because it was so damn fast.
Well, it was amazing, but then they had something else that still to this day is shrouded in mystery. Der Glock, okay, which means the bell. And that's one of the things Chris is going to be talking about tonight. Chris, what do you got to respond to any of that?
Well, Don, you hit a lot of great points, but I actually want to go back farther about German history. I want to start with 1905 when Albert Einstein actually proved the theory of relativity, where he says that time travel could be possible. Well, the Germans, when they heard this, they actually threw out conventional science and they started going with stuff like quantum mechanics or, string theory. They were actually working on that in the early 1900s. And they kind of said, we're going to take this science away and we're going to bring in this new science. And they were very good at it. They were studying relatively, quantum and everything about that. And they were actually thinking about wormholes. Now, this struck me as kind of funny because, there were people that were actually developing rocket power back in the 1920s in Germany. They were getting the theories. One of them was Herbert Oss. He was part of the rocket scientists that started a society that wanted to develop two-stage rockets at that particular time. As a matter of fact, he won a French award in 1929 for his work in rocketry. He wrote a book about interplanetary travel, and he was actually the teacher of Werner von Braun. And one of the things that really struck me was Herman. There's this famous saying that Werner von Braun said, "We had help. We had help." It was Herman that actually said that first. Werner von Braun was actually repeating what Herman was saying, and Herman even alluded to that their help was not of this world. So that really started me on a drive to find out what they were talking about with, the wonder weapon. So when Hitler got into power, everybody knows he was insane, but he was also insane on the occult, and so was Himmler. And they wanted to develop what they call Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons. And these wonder weapons were going to be designed to master the whole world and stuff. So Hitler sent people all over the world to find artifacts and religious significant value that he believed that would make him more powerful. And we know that, he was a demented guy, but the Nazis were so advanced, starting to get so advanced in theory of advanced propulsion, that they actually started looking at anti-gravity. Now, you hit something that was really great because, as you said, Don, as we were flying biplanes, they were working on jet propulsion. Their Messerschmitt ME-262, as you said, the Horten 229 flying wing, which, nowadays you look at our B-2 Spirit bombers and our bombers, they're all one-wing design. And that probably came from the Horten brothers classes. Now, you also mentioned the flying bomb. They know it as the Fletcher. The Fletcher was known also as the buzz bomb. And that was probably a primitive remote control or drone, because they had to remote control it, because it was a short range aerial type thing. So there were so many things that were going on with that. And so one of the things they started doing is they went, as when they took over Poland, there was an SS general by the name of Hans Kalmer, Kammler, Kalmer. Ruthless guy, very ruthless. He took 250,000 people, and he cordoned off a whole valley. You couldn't get in there. You would be shot if you went into this valley. And he dug a mid-sized city underground where they did all their top secret testing of all kinds of different things. That's where they believed the Glock was born. So what they were thinking of doing is electromagnetic vortex energy. And they were trying to develop that into something that could levitate itself. The idea was to be able to do that. And so what they were looking at is some texts from Hindu religion and also from Buddhist religion. The Buddhists actually, in their Sanskrit teachings and stuff, talk about a thing called the stupa. And the stupa was actually very similar to what the Glock was. And so they brought a lot of that text stuff back to Germany, analyzed it, and they started working on the Glock, the bell. And what they believed was that they took a element and mixed it with red mercury and were able to somehow power it to spin and gyroscope itself to levitate. Now, we see this thing over in this area in Poland, this concrete. I'm sure you're aware of it, Jerry, and both Don, of this concrete circle. You've seen pictures of that, correct? Right.
Yes.
So the way it sounds is they were having a hard time stabilizing the bell. The bell was actually designed not as a craft at first, but it was designed as a propulsion system because they actually show a diagram. They found a diagram that looked something like similar to the bell within a saucer-shaped object. So they were actually taking that and trying to stabilize it. And the theory was that they hooked it to heavy metal chains around this circle thing. The bell would be able to levitate but couldn't take off. And so what they actually were trying to do is build that propulsion system in it. And some people say they were successful. They actually had a test flight. But it wasn't just the bell that they were working on. They were working on all kinds of circular type of stuff, even back in the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic started working on stuff, and I'm trying to think of the name of their first craft. It was VZ1, something of that nature, which was circular in nature. And then, of course, Fokker, who did the patents on the Fokker plane and stuff, he actually designed a circular craft also that had twin rotors that had the exhaust almost like a jet engine coming out was there. So they were very much on fixed wing aircraft, one wing, the flying wing that they called the Horton stuff. And they were also very fixed on trying to do anti-gravity. You got to remember, the Nazis actually started building atomic reactors. When the Allies actually found this place, they had to dismantle these reactors. There had some radioactivity to it.
Well,
that's why they had a large supply of heavy water.
Yes,
there's a very famous case where I believe they were Norwegian commandos working for the Special Operations Executive out of the UK that went into Norway because they were creating heavy water there. And the fear was that their nuclear program was accelerating, and this stuff was being shipped out, and these commandos blew up that vessel, sinking the heavy water. Are you guys familiar with that?
I am. It was Victor Schallenberg and another Nazi scientist that were actually working on different types of energy for nuclear energy or atomic energy at the time. And Victor Schallenberg was actually working on a prototype UFO type thing that was called the Discus. And at that time, they theorized that they could travel 1,200 miles an hour, and that would reach 40,000 feet, which was unheard back in 1930s and 1940s. But here we are talking about, them being able to do that. So they were able to take that water, bring it back over into Germany, the heavy water, and started developing, atomic power. They were very much on the verge of it because they actually had the designs of the reactors. We actually had Allied troops go in and disassemble these reactors to be able to bring it over, along with about 1,600 Nazi scientists to start on our programs with it. So atomic power was just on the verge of being completed there in Nazi Germany at the time.
Well, at the end of the war, we were grabbing as many German scientists as we could lay our hands on. So were the Russians, okay?
Oh, yeah.
They were grabbing everybody they could grab. And one of the people that they ended up bringing back to the States under a top secret program called Operation Paperclip was Werner von Braun. Okay. Now, von Braun today is lauded as one of the reasons we went to the moon, a great NASA scientist. And I got to tell you, it's always irritated me to the nth degree that this guy achieved that celebrity status that he had until he died. Because the fact of the matter was, Werner von Braun, and I'll just be very blunt, was a Nazi son of a bitch, okay? He was an SS colonel.
Yes, he was.
He was an SS colonel, and he used and abused slave labor at Peenemünde, which was a top secret Nazi place where they were developing these flying bombs. God only knows how many died at Peenemünde. And of course, I'm one way when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think we should have squeezed him for everything we could get out of him. Then we should have taken him out and hung the son of a bitch.
Well, he was a bad guy. There was no question about it. He did things that killed a lot of British people because he worked on the V2 rocket, and then he was the main guy that developed the V4. Now, the V4 was so advanced, and it was devastating the United Kingdom at the time. And he was the main person of that. He did use slave labor to build Peenemünde. He did use experimental stuff that ended up killing people there. So, at his time, and he was a Nazi Party member. Let's not make any mistake about it. People around him that didn't have his knowledge were being hung. But they kind of sacrificed that to bring him here to the States with 16 other scientists, brought him in, like you said, Operation Paperclip. And then this guy, being a Nazi Party member, ends up getting the highest engineer award in the United States. So you're right. We should have got everything we could. But it wasn't just him. It was Herbert Oberst, too. Herbert Oberst was a guy that worked within the Nazi Party, helped build these rockets, gave the fundamentals to the society, the Vril Society, and also the Scientist Society to build these devastating weapons. They weren't building anything for humanity. They weren't working on medicines, or they weren't working on, genetics that would help people. They were working on genetics that hurt people or make an Aryan race, because they always believed. This is one of the things that kind of makes me believe that they might have had some outside help. Hitler had instituted an idea that the Aryan race was from Nordic gods, and that they were not of this planet. They were from descendants of Nordic gods, and that a lot of high-level Nazis believed, in alien existence at that time. And, as Herman Ober said, and also Werner von Braun, they had help on the advancement, and they advanced so quickly. That's the amazing thing. Within 3 or 4 years, like you said, they went from biplanes to jet propulsion. So, I mean, yeah, they were smart, but I mean, that's a lot of stuff done in such a short time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Werner von Braun, and I do want to add my point too, is that they should have been basically day-free prisoners while they worked for the U.S. And the only thing that keeps them from a hangman's noose should have been while they're doing stuff for this country.
Well, the thing that got him out of the problem, Jerry, the thing that got him out of the hangman's noose was his development of the Saturn V rocket that actually went to the moon. As you know, at that time,
which is what he was originally working on to begin with, because before the Nazi Party, Werner von Braun had aspirations to send the first man to the moon. He told Orps that back in 1930 that, it was Picard. Picard, he said that too. Picard, the aviationist who created the first balloon that went up in the atmosphere. He told him that, no, I see beyond this. I see us going to the moon with what I'm working on. And what he was working on even back then was the precursor to what would be the V1 rockets or the V2 rockets.
Right.
And then
now one of the things that they were first of all, there's no excuse, because when Hitler took power, he Nazified all scientific communities. All scientific industries were Nazified. You were in there. You either had the choice of getting out, and sometimes that wasn't a choice, but you were in the Nazi party if you were developing scientific work. There was no ifs, ands, buts, or what's about it and stuff. And they
almost
were
like
working
the Soviet Union.
Yeah, same thing. You either the Gulag or you're working for the state.
Yep.
So it was no different. But they knew what they were making. Werner von Braun wasn't fooled. Herman wasn't fooled. All these other scientists weren't fooled. They knew, they knew that they were making weapons of mass destruction. And that's what they were going for. The Third Reich wanted to make weapons of mass destruction so powerful that they could back down the United States. They knew they couldn't invade the United States. Hitler always said, we cannot invade the United States. It's just too big. It's just has much. We have to almost like destroy it or take it from within, as we see nowadays. But I mean, they started developing the Glock with the idea that if we make these saucers, if we make these flying machines, because they knew they wanted to make stuff that could do unusual aeronautics ability. They wanted to be able to weaponize it so much that if you saw a pattern of these things coming over your country, you would just surrender.
Yeah. And we know they had aspirations.
You mentioned Herman Oberth.
Yeah.
And Oberth is considered the absolute godfather of German rocketry.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the mid-50s, all right, one of the top, if not the top, UFO investigator was Major Don Kehoe.
Yes.
Okay. Kehoe of the United States Marine Corps had been an aviator. As a matter of fact, after he graduated from Annapolis and became an aviator, he took the first air group, flew it into Guam. Now, sometime during that process, he was involved in an air crash. Obviously, he survived, but he medically retired from the Marine Corps. Until World War II, they called him back, but he was mostly desk duty, that type of thing. But During the 30s, he became a noted writer of aviation things. Anything having to do with aviation, Keyhoe was onto it. As a matter of fact, it was Keyhoe who really brought a national spotlight in the mid to late 40s on the UFO topic. Now, during the 50s, he wrote a series of books on his investigation. I have still most of them, and I've read them all numerous times. And he had a fascinating story, Chris, on Herman Oberth. It was probably his third book that Keyhoe wrote. And even John Lear, his father, William Lear, the stormy genius, talked about this publicly in the 50s, okay? The guy that brought us the Lear jet, the guy that brought us the Lear-Sigler Corporation. And that was talking about working on gravity drives, things having to do with gravity, electromagnetism, and other things. And in 1958, before he was sequestered by the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, Herman Oberth, at his last public appearance where he talked to the press, was asked about his research. And he mentioned the gravitic research. And they said, well, Dr. Oberth, how will this benefit us? He said, once we get this done, and it should be shortly. Now, this is 58. Remember that. Once we get this completed, we'll be able to get to the moon in just about 2 days, if that, and we'll be able to fly around the solar system. And then, boom, everything went dead quiet. He was never heard from publicly again.
Well, they tell him to shut up because we don't want this out to the public. But you see, Herbert was working on this stuff well back in 1923. He was a genius. I mean, you know, some of these scientists were just absolutely phenomenal geniuses. And there was a theory that they were working on something called Zerum 525. Now, I have never heard of this before, but Zerum 525 was supposed to have been mixed with mercury. And by doing that, they thought the theory that they could harness negative energy. If you harness negative energy, you would be able to have so much, because the biggest problem was to be able to fly distances would take so much time and stuff. But if you could harness negative energy, you would be able to create wormholes and be able to get from place to place to place in a relatively, short period of time. So this is one of the theories they were working on, is that this propulsion system with mercury and Zerum 525 would be able to harness that, put into the Glock, the bell, and make it as a propulsion system. Now, one of the things that they found out, and actually they did a study on this, and it found out to be true, that instead of a fixed wing or circular craft, as they were going to try to put the bell into a circular craft, they found out that the bell shape, the actual shape of it, had less wind resistance than a circle object. So they said, well, instead of making this just a propulsion system, let's try to make this as the actual ship itself. And so that's one of the things they were working on. And thank God that they did not be able to complete this, because had they did, it would have changed the outcome of the war, I believe.
Well, excuse me. You mentioned Hans Kammler, who was an SS general. Now, that's one of the great mysteries of this story, because he flat disappeared. Disappeared. There's no evidence that I'm aware of, maybe you might have turned something up, that the American military got their hands on them. But
no,
whether
because
he went to South America with the rest of the Nazis or whatever, it's unknown. But that's always been something, Chris, that fascinated me.
well, the SS General Hans Kellner was probably one of the most evil men the world's ever seen. He was right up there with Hitler, Himmler, the whole bit. I mean, this guy took forced labor, killed them all, and then when he saw that he might have been captured, he actually killed a lot of scientists. He said, sorry for you, thank you for your work, but it looks like we're losing the war. You're all going to die. And so he disappeared. Now, there are rumors that there was a piece of property, because, Germany was surrounded. The Russians weren't going to let these guys go, and the French and British weren't going to let them go. But there was actually a small bit of land that was a stateless property connected to Germany. And a lot of these Nazis fled there because it was a stateless area, and it was no state. And they were able to get forged papers. They were to get another identity and be able to get out of Germany and be able to, come to South America, where a lot of them were able to take that route. Also, what people don't realize is there was a bishop by the last name of Hadid or something like that in the Roman Catholic Church. He was a Nazi sympathizer, and there's a belief that maybe some of these generals like Hans Kammler went to the Roman Catholic Church and got forged papers, a new identity, and were able to slip out with the help of the Roman Catholic Church. I never knew that until I started studying this.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the Pope at the time is Leo the 12th, I think.
I don't know who was
took
the Pope,
a lot of heat because of the pro-Nazi sympathies that lay within the Vatican. They were instrumental in getting a lot of those guys out. You heard of the Odessa network, okay? That was something set up by the SS to facilitate those guys getting the hell out of Europe, most of them to South America. But some of them were tracked. Some of them went underground. For example, Joachim Peiper, the SS colonel that was in charge of the SS troops that performed the Malmedy massacre at Bastogne in 1944. When the Nazis launched their Operation Watch on the Rhine, which was the invasion of Western Europe, everybody thought they were on the ropes. Hitler, being the maniac he was in charge of this. They had tremendous tank corps, battalions of tanks, Tiger tanks, Panzer IVs, the best the Nazis had. Problem was they barely had any gasoline. What they wanted to do was to break through all the way to Brussels, okay, where the Allies were getting so many of their supplies getting ready to go into Germany, take Brussels, destroy the ports. Thankfully, they never managed to get there. The 101st Airborne was one of the reasons they didn't. Okay, the 101st, if you saw Band of Brothers, you know what those guys did. All right, they managed to stop them almost in their tracks. But the bottom line was all that stuff that they did helped shorten the war, because all that equipment then couldn't be used on the Russians who were invading them on their eastern flanks. So yeah, it was some pure Looney Tunes.
One of the other things, Don, going back to the General Hans Kammler, one of the things was that he was so involved with top secret projects that, I mean, one of the projects he was working on was called Project Kronos, which is the name of the Titan god of time. And they also believed that they were working on time travel, and they were actually theorizing that they could actually start doing time travel, which was part of what they wanted. Now, when Kemmler decided to start killing all these scientists, knowing that he might have been captured or something, there's also a theory that he had so much information on stuff that they wanted to kill him. They say he can't be captured. They got to get rid of him. So there's a possibility that his own people, because of what he was working on, anti-gravity, time travel, bending space and time, the Nazis were doing all that. And I mean, they were actually trying to work on stealth. When they found out that the British had radar, they were trying to devise systems that would confuse radar to be able to stealthily get to England and bomb it without being seen. They were actually trying to confuse the electromagnetic waves, the Doppler waves, to throw off radar. So, I mean, these guys knew what they were, but they did not want, Hitler wanted to make sure none of this got into foreign hands. He did not want it out of this because, well, and I'm sure you probably have the same theory. Hitler didn't die in some, bunker somewhere where they threw his body. I mean,
No.
I've talked to, my friend Lenny DePaul, who actually searched for Hitler, and he believes that Hitler went to Argentina, as you said, Don, to live a life in Argentina under a disguised name and stuff, and he died in Argentina.
I surmise in my story, graphic novel I'm working with a Brit on called Operation Hound Dog, that he was assassinated in Argentina, and their attempt at building a nuclear reactor there was destroyed, which is some of the things that were found by the research team, which I'm assuming your friend was involved with. They found what looked like clearly was supposed to be mid-river. It was on an island nuclear reactor they were trying to build, and I surmise that it all was brought down and destroyed on the eve of Perón's overthrow. They used that as cover.
Also, Jerry, not only were as Don said, not only were they stockpiling heavy water, but they had storage of uranium. There were actually Allied troops and other people that their skin was actually falling off of them because of high dose of radiation.
Yeah.
In certain areas.
I do want to throw something in. The Tom Cruise movie, The Attempted Assassination of Hitler, that was the Catholic Church that was behind that. Pope Pius attempted on 3 occasions to assassinate and help overthrow Nazi Germany and get rid of Hitler. So he wasn't a compliant. He was trying to play a centralized person and allowed his local bishops to do their jobs within Germany, which is why you had the Assisi Underground, getting the Jews out of Germany and Poland. That's how my brother's father survived. His entire family was killed, except for him and his brother. They were brought out as children under the Assisi Underground. So I'm not a Christian anymore. I'm agnostic, but I've always been Catholic, and I did my research on what happened during World War II and whether the Catholics were as guilty as some people try to make them out to be. So I defend them slightly because I do know that they attempted to overthrow, fund, and bring down the Third Reich.
Well, I got a curveball. I've got a curveball to throw.
All right.
Okay. Did you guys ever see the film The Man Who Killed Hitler and Sasquatch?
Fuck yes, I did. I love that movie.
No,
Sam Elliott. Goddamn right.
I think the Sasquatch threw me off of that film.
The Sasquatch is toxic, by the way. He's toxic physically. Is horrifying.
Yeah. If you didn't see it, Chris,
I
Make
gotta
yourself a bucket of
You
popcorn.
got to see that. Sam Elliott knocked that one out of the park.
Oh
Okay.
my God!
Good film.
You know,
Oh yeah. You talk about a Chuck Norris badass. Oh,
it's that good.
Sam was bad in that. Yeah.
Piece of shit, man.
you know,
Sam Elliott is one of the last tough guys in Hollywood.
Is he really?
Him and
oh yeah,
Tom Selleck. Yeah. Tom Selleck actually, they both served. They served stateside. They never deployed, but they served, and so they know their shit though when they do military movies. That's why they're always good in military films.
You know, I have a question for you. If you think that they were able to build atomic stuff, do you think the war would have been different? The outcome?
Yeah, because the intention was they built that. They were building. They hadn't built. They were building that super bomber. It was like a flying wing, giant fucking flying wing, and the full intention was to have that thing fly all the way over to the United States and bomb New York City. And they wanted to drop an atomic weapon. And that was a goal. And I even wrote I know this is funny, I wrote an Indiana Jones script for Dark Horse they loved, but they couldn't publish because of the fact they'd lost the rights to Indiana Jones, where Braun and his men were building a rocket silo in a fake pyramid built over a real pyramid that would open up and launch rockets at the United States from the Yucatan.
These guys, even though they were insane, they were brilliantly insane. I mean, Captain Rupert from Project Blue Book, he said, had the Allies not done what they've done at that, if the Germans had maybe a few months more or something, the outcome of the war would be different. They were so advanced in aviation design that they actually believed that they would have made UFOs.
Well, the Manhattan Project wasn't initially meant for Japan.
No, it was made for Germany.
The Manhattan Project was made for Germany.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And the German racial policy of persecuting and murdering the Jews. Can you imagine?
Gypsies, and homosexuals and mentally ill.
Can you imagine what would have happened if Albert Einstein had stayed over there instead of emigrating to the United States?
He would have died.
Yeah, well, yeah, but if they utilized his intellect and his talent for the atomic program, that's what I'm referring to.
They probably would have, under the threat of killing him, you got everything out of him before killing him.
Yeah. Well, the thing what they did was with the atomic program, they first took Albert Einstein and Enrico Fermi. They brought them up to New York. Actually, it was in New York, called the Hudson Valley, Tuxedo Park. And there was a secret lab in Tuxedo Park that a person, I'm trying to think of his name. He was a billionaire and he was also a physicist. And he developed a secret lab right in the middle of Tuxedo Park. And he brought these two guys up. And the idea was to work on the equations for the atomic bomb that could be sent to Los Alamos and, the testing sites and everything where they can actually make the device. They didn't make the device up there, but they worked on the equations to how it would work. And then when they got down to Los Alamos and those scientists down there, they've realized that they have to make an implosion type of device as opposed to an explosion type of device to make the chain reaction. But the idea that if those guys ever fell into Nazi hands before, like you said, if they didn't immigrate, they would have been much more farther advanced than what they were. I mean, because their science was unbelievable at the time. The stuff that it wasn't just the Glock they were working on. They were working on how to bend space and time, before the war even started. So if they were successful in that stuff, we would have been.
If they'd had more of the scientists who hadn't fled to the United States, absolutely, they would have been even further along. It kind of reminds me of Robin Williams when he was in Germany on a talk show, and it abruptly ended right after he made this joke because the German host asked him, "Why do you think there are so few German comedians out there today?" And he said, "Well, did you ever consider the fact you maybe killed all of them?"
Well,
and the went commercial came back and Robin was gone. He was not dead. Kicked him off
Germany
the show.
At the time, Jerry, they had an industrial might, and maybe not as close because the United States industrial might didn't really start taking place until the war started. Once the war started and Japan hit Pearl Harbor, then we started really building our industries, for war stuff and do everything. But the Germans were very much industrialists. They factory after factory after factory. They were able to put out stuff that was only the United States could beat them. I mean, the English,
there were some cultural things too, Chris, as opposed to everybody else. Now in Germany, okay, the women had one job, okay, under the Nazis, and that was to be homemakers and baby makers. Okay. Yep. Now, as the war went along, all right, and they began losing hundreds of thousands of troops and everything else, they finally started to filter some women into German industry. They had to. All right. They didn't have the manpower. But in Soviet Russia, okay, something that absolutely the Germans went crazy over was the fact that the Soviets were filtering and placing women in combat units. Some of their most effective snipers, and boy, the Russians used snipers by the bucket. All right.
A lot of women snipers.
Yep. Some of those women had 300, 400, 500 kills. And what did the Germans do when they caught a Russian woman in uniform? Well, the first thing they did was abuse them terribly. And I think you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
And then they murdered them. Okay. They took very few women Soviet prisoners. They killed them because in their mind, women fighting in a war in uniform, that's verboten. So they had a lot of cultural,
and that's where they excelled, by the way. And I still stand by that even today. Great pilots, fighter pilots, women. They make great fighter pilots. They make great snipers. I don't think I would say 97.8% of women don't belong in infantry at all. Very few women have what it takes to be in infantry.
Physically.
Physically. And I said this when I was in the military to females I were training, to the point of I would make them cry because I would make them endure trying to take the biggest guy we had in our platoon and drag them from one point in the lane up a cliff through all these different traps to the last one being oiled sand, and you got to go do low crawl under barbed wire and drag this guy, and they couldn't get him. And I would stand over him and just go, "Don't worry, he'll heal on his own. You don't need to save him. Your tears will make him better."
One of the things, Jerry, that a Marine officer told me one time is that women are terrible broadswords, but they're excellent scalpels. And what he meant by that is you can't put them with a Marine infantry unit. They would not survive. But if you put them in a specialty, like a fighter pilot or a sniper or something, they excel. They really do excel in an independent combat role as opposed to working in a team. They just, I'm sure I'm going to.
Women are like cats. They're designed to be
1 minute till break. 1 minute till break.
Well, just to say that they are excellent scalpels when it comes to warfare, and that's what the thing was. But going back to what Don says, they wanted to build an Aryan race. Germany wanted to build an Aryan race, so it was to them that they wanted their women to marry certain men and have offspring by certain men because they wanted them blonde hair, blue eyes, 6 feet tall, the whole bit.
Okay,
absolutely. Perfect ending to the break.
That being said, we're going to go to break right now. My guest tonight, Mr. Chris DePerno. Mr. Gary Cassell is helping me with the co-hosting duties. And this is Dark Matters Radio, brought to you exclusively by KGRA Digital Broadcasting. We'll be back. And we are back. Hey, guys, by the way, about a month and a half, 2 months ago, my wife got into a frenzy of spring cleaning.
Oh, boy.
And she started dragging stuff out here and dumping it on me, telling me, do you really need this? Do you really need that? I'm tired of looking at it. I want you to get rid of it. One of the things she brought out was this. Let me see if I can get it here. This is a view into, let me see, yesteryear.
Oh, yeah, the floppies.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Floppy disks. I got a whole bag of them here. So I didn't have a clue what the hell was on this. So I started getting frantic. I got to know what's on this stuff. I got to know what's on. How can I look at it? No computers anymore will take a 3.5-inch floppy disk. So I did a little research on the web, and I discovered that you can get a USB drive where you can plug it into your USB port and then check out these disks. So I got one, and I started looking at some of this stuff. I could not freaking believe my eyes. A lot of it was stuff we worked on at UFO Magazine back in the 90s. A lot of stuff that I wrote. As a matter of fact, I came up with several articles that I had done on Colonel Gordon Cooper, original Mercury 7 astronaut, the last solo astronaut that flew highest and furthest by himself in basically a tin can. And, for over 20 years, and I still dabble in it a little bit, but for over 20 years, I was bone deep in lunar transient phenomena, moon mysteries. And this is going to bring me to my point. I became convinced that there is at least an inoperative base on the far side of the moon, but much more likely it's a base still in operation by who knows. Well, roughly 10 or 12 years ago, Gary may be able to pin it down. He's got a better handle on some of this stuff than I do. But a film came out, kind of a satirical comedy called Something Iron Sky, where
Iron
the
Sky.
the Nazis at the end of World War II had the technology to get up to the moon, and they built a base up there. And if you've never seen it,
Chanel, can you show the screen that I shared?
There's a couple.
This is my graphic novel. I did the Iron Sky graphic novel with Mikko Radulatutti. I have trouble pronouncing his name. He's a friend of mine from the Netherlands. And the whole concept, my comic was to help them get funding for the film. And the story is this, that at the end of World War II, you can get your own copy of the book right there, that at the end of World War II, The Germans fled in the Bell, or their UFOs, their ships that they had created, to the moon, where they go up there and they're mining hydrogen. I forget the number of the hydrogen that they're hunting for. And they're on the dark side of the moon and mining for this great artwork. This is a great book series. This is episode 1. This is just one chapter.
Yeah.
And I helped create the comic book. And the whole premise to it was that I was going to explain away all the UFO stories, including abductions and animal mutilations and shit like that, to mishaps by the Germans when they tried to capture cattle to take to the moon. And it's still in the comic book. They try to get one and they end up dragging the cow to death, and it just falls apart on the end of a chain.
Well, and, Jerry, you're not really far off, because one of the things that people don't discuss, but they believe happened in 1936, there was a UFO crash in Germany, and the Nazis were able to obtain, from what I understand,
reverse engineer,
and were very successful in getting to reverse engineering what they have found. One of the things that also that I like to delve into is everybody talks about Roswell being, a extraterrestrial craft, but there's some theory looking at because people believe that we actually got a bell, the Glock, and we were able to get it. And one of the things that they talk about are two incidences. One, that Roswell may have been our attempt at first to try to fly it and work it and do the things, and there was an accident. Now, I don't have any proof on it, but that is a theory that's floating around, because one of the reasons why they say that theory is because everybody from the government has to shut up about Roswell. Private people have always talked about Roswell, this or that. But if you look at Grush and some of the other people, when they bring up the thing of Roswell, they're told they can't talk about it. Very specific with David Grush. He was told, I'm not allowed to talk about Roswell. Now, why is that? If you talk about all this other stuff, murder, you're talking about threatening lives, you're talking about all this UFO stuff, and then when you hit one of the oldest things that is in our UFO history, Roswell, he can't say a word about it. So that, to me, sends up a red flag, Mike.
Oh boy!
Don, with all this everybody's talking about, and
it made no sense to me, none.
Right, it doesn't, and so that's why I want to delve into Roswell as being maybe some of our top secret stuff. The other thing was in Kettsburg, Pennsylvania. When people try to say, "Oh, it was a Soviet satellite." Well, Soviet satellites, when they come crashing on Earth, don't make turns. This thing made a turn, made more than one turn.
I was 95 miles from that when it happened.
Were you? Did you see it?
No.
And stuff. No. But when the Kettsburg incident happened, this thing, before it hit the forest, it was almost like more of like a sliding landing than it was a crash. That's number one. Number two, that the thing made turns before it actually hit the ground. So you got to rule out a meteorite. You got to rule out a satellite, because it's not going to have propulsion if it's coming into the atmosphere. It's going to burn up, or it's just going to crash. This thing didn't exactly do that. And then the third thing, there's witnesses that said that this was like an acorn-shaped object that had really strange markings. Exactly.
I worked on the film Kettsburg, and I did all the production art for it, and that was one of the most interesting things, was designing the alien and doing the ship and getting to look at all those hieroglyphs that were supposedly on there. And I do want to point out, this goes back to something that Don has talked about. with such an advanced technology, how are these things crashing? And I don't believe they were crashing. I believe they were shot down by opposing forces.
That could be. That could very well be. But here's the thing that kind of interests me. In the Kesper thing, they said there was hieroglyphics, like you said. They also said that the bell had hieroglyphics. They also said that a lot of extraterrestrial crafts that people have gotten close to have strange markings or hieroglyphics.
That incident over in Brendlesham Forest at the airbase there had markings on the outside.
Yeah, Don, I mean, you can speak to that. You knew the guys that were at Rendlesham, correct?
Yeah. Now, I got to tell you, I've always had mixed feelings. I knew Chuck DeCarroll. Now, Chuck was a reporter, journalist. He worked for CNN. He did one of the first big stories on the Rendlesham incident, CNN, back in, I think it was 84, just about the same time that Richard Doty slipped a quick one into Linda Howe and derailed her story on HBO. She had a big UFO story she was going to be doing. And Doty, God knows who he was working for, supposedly OSI, but had promised her that he could get her Air Force footage of actual UFO events. And then at the last minute, they jerked it away from her, which torpedoed her story. But Chuck DeCarroll got elbow deep into that. And I knew some of the other people, John Burroughs, the Colonel, Halt, Larry Warren, until he imploded. And he imploded in a very big way, which really hurt the case. But yeah. Now, what was the deal with Rendlesham? RAF Woolbridge. What was the deal? Why would UFOs be interested in that?
What's a nuclear base?
Let's go back to 1980 when it happened. What was going on? The Russians had just invaded Afghanistan. Jimmy Carter retaliated by pulling us out of the Olympics, which I'm sure they were really upset about that.
Yeah.
Poland was on the edge of a revolution. Now, if you know anything about your history in the 20th century, Hungary, the nation of Hungary, did that in 1956. They had a revolution. What did the Russians do? They rolled in the tanks by the thousands and crushed it. Well, the fear was they were going to do that in Poland. And if they did, that would have been possibly the spark
of World
War III.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what else was going on? Tactical nuclear weapons were stored at RAF Woolbridge. Tactical nukes, not the huge ICBMs. The ones that, if the Russians would have invaded Western Europe through the Fulda Gap, these small nukes could have been flown over there to impede the tank columns. They would have used them to destroy those tank columns.
Yep.
What did the UFOs do that overflew that base? They went in to the weapons storage area. This is something you don't hear often. And they did something by shining bright beams into the storage facilities. Now, we know from our own UFO history in 1967, when an ICBM base was invaded by UFOs, and they did exactly the same thing. Not only did they knock an entire flight of ICBMs offline. If World War III would have broke out, we couldn't have launched them, but they ended up destroying these to the point where several, at least one, possibly more, had to be totally replaced. Now, what did it do in RAF Woolbridge? We don't know. But we do know that they shown beams doing something in those storage areas. So yeah, this is something that should be at the forefront of every researcher's thought process. Okay, this is one of those cases that show real intent of something, perhaps a warning. I don't know.
Well, it's just like when they went over our rockets and our ICBMs, and they would switch everything on and then switch it off, showing that they had control over our equipment.
And they did that in the USSR too.
Well, not only did they do that in the USSR, but they also turned them on one time and had a countdown going, and the Russians couldn't stop.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
You remember? They actually turned the weapons on, and a countdown was going. And the Russians were going frantic because they go, we have no control over this. And so they not only was it a warning, but maybe saying, hey, we can also turn them on if we want to get rid of you too.
That's scary shit, man.
What's that?
You brought up something about Linda Howe, and I wanted to bring up something.
Skynet, doesn't it? Almost like Skynet.
Oh, Skynet from Terminator, right? But you brought up the thing about Linda Howe having that yanked away from her last minute on her HBO special. Let's go back to 1971 when a gentleman by the name of Robert Ebenegger. That's him. That's the guy.
Yeah.
And he was working directly with our government and the Department of Defense to make a documentary about UFOs. And he was promised footage of the Air Force had footage. They showed him the footage. This is supposedly also what inspired Spielberg hearing this. He mixed it with that story of the story in Tennessee with the family that got attacked in the cabin, mixed all these stories in there, but it was all inspired by this film strip that was in the possession of the U.S. Air Force that they showed. Ebenegger, is that his name?
Ebenegger.
He last minute, as he starts making this documentary, all of that got pulled out last minute. And so they ended up, it's a great documentary with Rod Serling narrating it. You also have, what's his name? The Penguin was one of the narrators on it too. God, I almost said his name. Burgess Meredith, that's it. And if you've never seen that documentary, I'm sure you guys have, but anybody listening hasn't seen it, go check out, find a copy of that documentary. It's one of the earliest ones that inspired me as a kid. It really had an impact on me. That one, the book and the documentary Chariots of the Gods impacted my interest in ufology. But imagine if the Air Force had let that happen, how different today would be.
Well,
but I don't think they ever intended to. I think this is a fucking game to them.
Like I said in my paper on disclosure, okay,
it'll never happen.
They're hiding a core secret, something so volatile it makes them shit their pants if it gets out to the public, and that core secret is protected by a special access program, which means if your name isn't on the bigot list, you ain't never going to know.
I don't think even the president of the United States is allowed on that list.
No, he's not.
He's not.
I think Trump was impacted.
Because presidents come, they go. Who sticks around forever?
Because Trump promised to dig into that stuff too, and he didn't ever announce anything.
No, Admiral Wilson. Look at Admiral Wilson. Admiral Wilson, who had probably the highest White House clearance you could get, was head of intelligence for the Joint Chief of Staff there.
DIA. He headed up the DIA.
Go pound salt. Yeah, he's told to go pound salt. He says, you ain't on the list. And he went down there and he threatened to cut off their funding.
That's actually a quote.
That.
That's actually a quote. And I love that. Go pound salt. Like, what an insult.
And pretty much that was it. And they actually had the courtesy of showing him the list. And there was no government people on it. It was all private corporation stuff.
Well, you remember a couple years back when the order came down for all the branches to turn over all information about UFOs, and the two organizations that refused was the U.S. Air Force and the CIA, which oddly were created within 2 months of Roswell.
Yeah.
Not to mention the National Security Act of the time, which you've talked about, which allows the U.S. Department of Defense and the CIA and the FBI to use lethal force against Americans that involved with
national security is going to be breached. Yes.
Yep. 1947, man.
Look what happened to Schumer and what's the congressman, Tim Burchett. They were saying, okay, we're going to get this stuff out. And what happens? The intelligence community say, no, you're not. And they shut Schumer down. They shut Tim Burchett down. Shut him down. So, I mean, they're looking and shaking their heads going, man, there was even a threat that they were going to primary Tim Burchett to just get him out of office. So,
well, see, this is going to maybe get me in trouble, but I don't give a shit. Okay? Kind of like the Merrick Garland deal right now, being subpoenaed by Congress. And he told them to go screw themselves. He's a bureaucrat. He's appointed. All right? Just like these sons of bitches in the DOD, okay, that are trying to get in there. The bureaucrats, it's the loggerhead. And it goes beyond any party affiliation or anything else. It's not politics in that regard. But that's what's going to kill us, man. The bureaucrats are going to kill us.
Well, the bureaucrats have become too powerful. They've forgotten that this republic is supposed to be governed by the people, not by them. And they've kind of lost that idea that they think that they're the kings.
Chris, do you hear that?
Hear what?
The laughter in the background?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I mean, I still hold true that they've forgotten what the Constitution is. Look, if the Congress says that he's in contempt, Merrick Garland was voted as being in contempt, and that he has to turn over certain tape recordings that, I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's a joke now, because on national television, and I don't want to get into politics, but I have to say this since you brought it up, the guy's walking in a field. He's got to be dragged back by the Italian prime minister because he starts going off in a different direction. When everybody's
the
singing
show's
and
over
dancing,
here,
he's
sir.
standing there going,
the show's over here.
You know? Yeah. But I mean, and then just at the big fundraising, he's standing there like he doesn't know what's going on. And I feel, honest to God, I'm more mad at his wife than I am him. He doesn't know what planet he's on. You know, I mean, there's rumors that he's crapping his pants when he's meeting people. I mean, this is such an embarrassment. But
I've watched the videos, and it really kind of does look like that.
But I mean, the idea is that this guy, it's not really all his fault. It's the people behind him that are propping him up, that are saying to this. And this is one of the reasons why, and Donna said this, that we're not going to get disclosure, because they don't care about us. They don't care about telling us the truth. And it could very well be because there's something that they think is so hideous that we will go crazy. Well, it's going to happen anyways. Look, if we have bad aliens coming to Earth, we're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. If we have different things that are going to happen to us, we're going to have to deal with it. Don't let us be caught with our pants down. You know what I mean? You know, we need to know what's happening, be able to deal with the subject, and move on from there. And if we can't deal with it, well, you know what? Oh, well. sooner or later it's going to happen. But I mean, this has gotten to such a state of affairs with ufology that you don't even understand or even believe 3/4 that now what's being said. Because Arrow and Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Arrow come out and say that we have no evidence of extraterrestrials or aliens? And then they find out that Arrow was nothing more but a big disinformation campaign. So how are you going to?
I've been watching these negative remarks for over 35 years, Chris. Okay, they could have a UAP land on the freaking White House lawn, and those guys would be out there denying it.
There would be Leslie Nielsen during the movie Naked Gun go with the rockets going off behind him going, "There's nothing to see here. Everybody disperse. Nothing to see here." This is not what you think.
That's the way our government thinks that we are so dumb that we don't. They say if we keep denying extraterrestrials, they're going to believe us. What was it?
Well, the fact is there are a lot of stupid people in every country in the world, and we have a good chunk of stupid people in this world. Those are the people who watch, commercial TV news. These people eat up whatever's being fed to them, and they buy it and move on. It's the guys that don't watch that kind of news, and we're a smaller percentage. I hate saying it. We do congregate, though. I mean, there's 3 of us right now in here, and thank God we're not in one room. They could just take us out, but not that they would. So, but the fact is
consider us that important.
I almost refer to us as a fringe, and we're not fringe because of the fact that we're out there with conspiracy theories that are ridiculous. It's just we have looked at things and analyzed it and gone, there's more going on here than they're letting us know, and they are withholding.
Did you guys just see that report that came out of Harvard by a bunch of scientists talking about the possibility that ET is here walking among us?
Yeah, sure. Already here. Yeah, that's what they believe.
Walking a lot of people have said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's improbable that they're not. It's highly unlikely they're not.
Why do we have the idea that extraterrestrials have to be so different from us? Why not? Why couldn't they be just like us? Same DNA, same type of structure. Just because we see gray aliens or Nordics or something doesn't mean that there's other species just like us.
What does Genesis say, Chris?
Says
God created mankind in his image.
Yeah. But I mean, that doesn't mean that he just created it on one planet.
No. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. I don't think that was the big spirit in the sky. Early humans worshipped beings that came down from the sky and saw them as gods. You and I would call them highly technologically advanced extraterrestrials.
Right.
Well, Genesis also says that there was a conversation between God and the angels where he said, let us make mankind in our image. And so clearly it was more than one. Because it's the plural.
And the thing is, I cannot believe that some of these top level scientists who have come out and said exactly what you said, they're walking among us, Don, would throw all their credibility, all their reputations on the line if they were not telling the truth. I mean, you're talking about guys in Israel who are the head of their science program. You're talking about scientists that are here. You're talking about people who have distinctions of being great scientists are telling us this. And if they're telling us this, then you got to take, I mean, some of it as truth, you know, and I believe it. I think they've been here for a long time. You know, I mean, if you look at the planet
Before
is
us,
full of resources.
I believe, before us. I think
You
they're
know,
here way before we were here. It explains FOXP2 protein, man.
One of the things that Lou Alessandro had mentioned or alluded to was that he thinks there's more than one civilization. At least he's alluded to that there's more than one civilization on this planet. And we all know there's been, you know, civilizations that died on this planet, but who's to say that there's not another civilization that
I always remember three of them, Chris. What are the theories behind them? Because I know the reptilians, the Greys, and the Nordics. What were some of the other ones? Do you know?
I you know what? My mind is going on that.
Because I know Lou said something about it.
Greys. There's
you remember
Andromedas.
Well,
the Pleiadians.
I have said in the past, and I've talked about it here a number of times, that I am convinced that prior to the end of the Ice Age, there was an advanced human civilization on this planet.
Yes.
Okay.
Called Atlantis.
A civilization that scanned the globe, that went on. You take a look at some of those very early sea maps, okay,
they
that
include Antarctica. Yep.
Yeah. And God only knows what knowledge and data was lost when the library at Alexandria burned up. Stuff going back thousands of years. But at any rate, here's the deal, that this advanced civilization either knew or had advanced warning that something terrible was going to happen roughly 12,000 years ago. That was the Younger Dryas event. Probably a comet or an asteroid, a big one, hit somewhere in the ice fields of North America and perhaps Northern Europe, Greenland for one, okay? They've discovered under the ice a crater over 100 miles in width. They didn't know it was there until a few years ago. And when that happened, what did that cause? That caused these masses of ice to melt, the oceans to rise anywhere from 2 to 400 feet. God only knows how many millions of square miles of land.
What does this sound like to you that knows science? It sounds like it caused us to go off our polar axis.
There's that.
But
these advanced humans got off planet, stayed off for a while. You know, after the Younger Dryas, there was another mini ice age for about 1,100 years. And then the climate settled down and they may have come back. And when they did, for whatever reason, they didn't come back on the land. They went underground. Now, how many times over the decades have you heard about people encountering beings when they're out cave spelunking or God knows what? Okay. The Native Americans have myths and legends about those they called the ant people coming up from below ground and helping them during these planetary-wide catastrophic events. So I am not shocked by the idea that there are those who live underground that could look just like you and I, and basically you could walk down the street, pass them, and you wouldn't know the difference.
No, I mean, what about giants, Don? There's always been talk about giants living within caves.
Nephilim, yes.
Yep.
Well, we go back to the Bible.
And we've had modern stories. You know, they've had older stories of that tribe that fought them and killed them here. You have that incident in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
With American special forces, getting killed in combat with this thing.
Yeah.
Just it's scary shit, man.
The Kandahar Giant. Yeah. Well, in the American Southwest, I think it was it the Paiute Native American tribe that encountered these 12 and 13 foot tall red-headed giants that were cannibalizing these people. And
that's where Uncle Bosie went.
Yeah. They gathered up all their buddies and they went down. They knew where these beings were living in this cave. They piled up all kinds of wood and brush and God knows what, began a fire, and they basically asphyxiated these giants that were eating them. Now, archaeological evidence has been found that support some of that.
Yep.
So, hey, I mean, now, where did they come from? Well, let's go back to the Bible. Let's go back to Genesis. And actually, even further, the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch. 200 angels, or call them astronauts if you want, were sent down to keep an eye on Earth. And in the Bible, Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 through 4, says, and they looked down upon the face of the earth. They saw, and I'm paraphrasing now, human females that they said, aren't they cute? And they went down and took as many wives and concubines as they wanted. And these women bore them children that became the men of renown, or giants, the Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
These giant human entities, I guess.
In fact, just to throw this in again with my love of film, you have a film called Noah with what's his name?
Russell
the
Crowe?
Australian actor Russell Crowe. Anthony Hopkins is in it, and it actually is not the Bible version of Noah. It is that version of Noah, and it shows the Nephilim as these giants covered in rock, because as part of their punishment. And it's an incredible film. And a lot of people,
it's an excellent film.
A lot of my Christian friends didn't like it. I love the movie. I'm like, this is more close to what probably happened.
Now, one of the things I'd like to just bring in here, because Don had mentioned before, what was going on in Antarctica that the Germans were so fascinated with Antarctica that they sent a whole contingent there to put a base there. There was a Nazi base in Antarctica. So
yeah, in Iron Sky, that is featured at the beginning. That's where all the UFOs were built, the flying saucers for the Germans.
Well, there was absolutely a Nazi contingent there. And, with Hitler's fascination of the occult, they must have found something in Antarctica that would allow them to stay there, because he wanted to travel everybody all over the place to find religious artifacts for him. So my thing that I'm trying to work on now is what was so fascinating in Antarctica, because even to this day, there's certain places you can't go in Antarctica. I thought that was a myth, but my daughter actually was on a research team that went down there. And when she went down there to Antarctica, she was told, okay, you're not allowed to go in this area. You're not allowed to go here. You're not allowed to go here. And you're not allowed to do this, this, and this. So there's a lot of stringent rules in Antarctica.
Well, let me put my detective hat on, okay? Once again, we got to go back a little bit to history. Now, we were talking about the maps of the Sea Kings a few minutes ago. And on the surviving maps, now, first off, we did not officially discover Antarctica until 1820. Now, the first real map that came out that was acknowledged as looking at South America and Antarctica was the Piri-Reis map. Now, Piri-Reis was a Turkish admiral and a cartographer that drew this map. And he said that his source material came from many ancient maps, all right? And it shows Antarctica as ice-free. Totally ice-free.
Green. It was green.
Right.
A lot of animal life and everything else there. Well, what happened 11,600 years ago? The Younger Dryas event. Something astronomical hit the Earth and screwed the pooch, all right? Probably knocked the Earth off its axis. It's believed that Antarctica basically had been more northern in a much more clement zone, and it slid down and basically became what it is today. Now, what was on there before? No doubt in my mind, an ancient civilization had lived there. And if you believe what you've heard about things like Admiral Byrd, you heard about Operation High Jump, right?
Right.
1946-47, Byrd took a major military presence down to Antarctica. They were to be there for several years. They ended up coming back in about 6 months. And as stories started to filter out, they got down there. They had aircraft. They began encountering saucer-shaped craft that harassed them. And there's some indication that hostilities might have broken out.
Well, they lost some people, didn't they, Don?
Yes.
They lost a lot of servicemen, from what I understand.
Yes.
So I mean,
my detective hat tells me that somebody is down there. They know somebody is down there. There are certain areas, as you just described, Chris, that is you can't go to. You can't even fly a freaking airplane across Antarctica. They have no fly zones. Now, let's not forget my old buddy, Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
The second man that stepped foot on the moon was down there, became very ill, don't know what happened to him. They had to evacuate him out of there. And when he got back, what did he say? He said it's evil down there, didn't he? Evil.
He said it was so evil. He said I think he said I faced evil, and it shook him up.
Well, I want to bring up another incident that took place on May 8th of 65 that's always fascinated me, is scientist Carl Disch, who was at Byrd Station in Antarctica, went out for a walk in Antarctica and disappeared. And they followed the trail of his feet, and the tracks ended.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That's happened to a lot of people, even here.
And that one's always spooked me. That what did he run into?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but didn't they send a contingent of scientists? And these guys were on Antarctica, off somewheres, and
European scientists,
and they were screaming for help. And a plane went, and I guess the pilot took a route that was faster to get to them, but it was an unauthorized thing. And I guess when they came back, they were met and interrogated the hell out of them. From what I understand, that they discovered like a large hole that was in the Arctic ice, and that they were pretty much shipped out of Antarctica and never really kind of heard again. They kind of sent to some.
Kind of sounds like going down to Area 51, doesn't it?
Yeah. A lot. I imagine people who've been there have been fascinated by some of the stuff that there, because we know, Don, Jerry, you all know that we got technology that's so wrapped up in black projects, we will never see it. And politicians have told us that these projects will never see the light of day. The corporations and stuff won't let it out because by honestly, from what I've been told, they can't make a profit on it. I mean, free energy and stuff, they're not going to make any money on that.
The bottom line is this goes so deep that even acknowledged two presidents, Bill Clinton and Obama, both said they inquired about the UFO thing and they were shut totally out. Nothing. Yeah. They didn't have a need to know. Okay, now think about that. The commander-in-chief of the United States of America doesn't have a need to know. Well, who the hell does?
What do you need to know? What do you need to know for? Hey.
But it's like you said, presidents come and go. They don't trust presidents. They actually were upset at some presidents because they found classified material just kind of sitting out. But I mean, how do you fire a U.S. president? You just, instead of firing them or doing anything like that, you can't do that. So you just leave them out of the loop on certain things.
There's only four that I think might have been in on the big secret. Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower.
Yep, they were the
Richard
last,
Nixon.
I have my
Richard
doubts.
Nixon. And there's some indication that Ronald Reagan knew a hell of a lot. I was told a story by a TV producer that I know that knew, or well, at least at one point knew Steven Spielberg. And when Spielberg came out with E.T., the movie E.T., the Extraterrestrial, they had a screening at the White House. And Ronald Reagan is said, this came to me, well, actually, it came from Spielberg to this producer to me. He said, actually, there's only a handful of people in this room. This is what Reagan is alleged to have said to Spielberg. There's only a handful of people in this room that know what there is to know about this subject, UFOs. And hey, now what do you do with a story like that? What do you do? It's secondhand. It's second hell. It's third hand. And
it startled the shit out of Jimmy Carter because he wanted to get at it because he had an experience, and he wanted to get.
So did Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Yep.
When he was governor of California, they encountered. He was flying somewhere in his jet. And he and Nancy, his wife, and they had a UFO encounter, and Reagan ordered the pilot to follow the UFO. Okay. And supposedly that just knocked him on his heels. And I imagine it would.
Oh, hell yeah. By the way, I do want to go back because I brought up Deesh, the guy who disappeared. I wanted to point out what he was working on that I believe made him a target was he was working on forward scattering of radio waves on the ionosphere. And I think that made him a threat. And I think they either took him or just disintegrated him to end that research that he was doing down there in Antarctica. Because it delayed the research.
Was that manipulating weather, Gary, or what?
It's manipulating radio waves and using our own ionosphere to bounce these radio waves. And I do believe that could be a potential threat to their flight patterns.
Is that something like
one, it could either bring them down, or two, it could have been something that caused them disruption, or three, make them detectable. Because, radio waves keep falling in. I know the horse shit going on with Skinwalker Ranch. But the one thing they are hitting on is the 1.65 radio wave, which is a transmission strong enough to leave the Earth. And that is for interstellar communication. And so radio waves plays deep into this stuff. And I know it does. But to what degree, I don't know. All I know is that we have a lead researcher in Antarctica working on this, happily working on this, happily married, has a great life, walks off and disappears.
And that brings me to something happen. You just triggered something. You see, this government does not want, and it's been through history, they will not tell the American people certain things. And I go back to what Trump was going to let out, the JFK assassination. But apparently whatever he found in those files were so bad that he had to keep them quiet from the public. Well, I agree with Don. In the ufology field, there's probably something that they think is so hideous, so bad, that if they let this out, we're in for all kinds of trouble. And I disagree with their philosophy, because if it's coming, it's coming. You know what I mean? But I mean, we have done this through history with ufology, with assassinations, with government and everything. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. So that's why I agree with Don. I don't think there'll ever be a time where you'll see true disclosure of the ufology field.
Well, we knew that answer the minute that the CIA and the Air Force refused to turn over any of their documents to the Senate and the House.
Yeah.
They refused. And I mean, they didn't even show up to refuse. They just said, we're not coming.
Yeah. And
there's
and
never
Don,
going to be disclosure.
No, there won't. And I think that what Don's paper was going, that these black op projects are getting, there's probably so much fraud in these black projects that they're doing in the ufology field that people, if it was disclosed, people will go to jail.
Yes, there's so much disinformation being fed in through, I believe, operatives that work directly with the government, including Stephen Greer is one of them, paid by the government to help create problems for ufology.
I'll give you an example of how the government is hiding things that just, they will not come out. And this has nothing to do with ufology, but it gives you the idea. Look at the Epstein list. Epstein, hey, I mean, these people are hideous.
Nobody's arrested yet.
Children. They were doing all kinds of crazy things. Yet
nobody's arrested.
Yeah. Epstein's dead, and Maxwell's in prison, and this list is kept quiet. Don, I know you got something to say about this.
I do. As a matter of fact, I do.
No way.
Jeffrey Epstein was never, ever, ever allowed to not practice his business in New York City. But who did they run out of there on the proverbial rail?
Trump.
Oh, Trump.
Now think about that. Think about that. Well, it's a good thing certain people aren't here to hear me say that, Chris.
But the thing is that this is one of the most heinous crimes you could think of. Destroying children's lives. And you would think that we would be pumped up and say, you got to do this. And what happens? Not a peep. Most people forgot about it by now. And yet these people who have done terrible things are just walking. And that just shows you how the government says, not going to do it. I don't care what you say or how much you yell or demonstrate. We're not going to do it.
Well, here's the bottom line, gang. We're about a minute and 30 seconds from the end of the show. Chris, you've got a show on, excuse all the background racket, You got a show on KGRA, iDetective. What's coming up on your show Wednesday?
Oh, great. Well, we're going to be talking about the cartels that are now infested our major cities. We have a retired ATF agent coming on who specialized in cartels and gangs, and he's going to explain how major cities now are being taken over by the cartels, especially this Venezuelan gang that is getting more evil as we talk. They are killing people without any idea, and they're recruiting at such a rapid rate. It's devastating.
Sounds like a job for the 82nd Airborne. And on Thursday, of course, we have UAP Crossfire, which will have Chris, myself, Commander Cobra, and I believe Mark D'Antonio.
Yeah, Mark D'Antonio will be joining us.
Okay, so that's what's coming up. Gang, we'll be back next week. Commander Cobra will be my guest then. We got a really special show coming up on July 1st. I'll mention more about that later. But in the meantime, have a great week. And hey, summertime's just in a couple of days. And we'll see you then. Gary, Chris, thanks, guys. Catch you on the flip side.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Gary.